I have no anger or jealousy over my wife cheating on me. I used to fantasize about trying to catch my wife cheating. I don't know why I enjoyed it, but I did. My wife never had any idea what I was doing. I had no reason to suspect Linda since she never gave me any reason to doubt her. I wasn't checking up on her because I thought she was cheating, but because it amused me. I don't know if you can understand that because I'm not sure I understand it. I pretended to know Linda was cheating on me and sat there trying to figure out how to find evidence to prove it. I watched her get dressed for work in the morning and wrote down what kind and color of panties, bra, stockings she put on, and when she came home in the evening, I made sure she was still wearing the same underwear. When she undressed to go to bed, I would go through the laundry basket and check her panties for stains or other substances you wouldn't normally expect to find there. Once or twice a week, I followed her when she left for lunch to see where she was going and with whom. On weekends and evenings, when Linda went out shopping alone or with friends, I watched her closely to make sure she was doing what she said she was doing. Once I even told Linda that I had to go away on a business trip, and then I spied on her for 3 days. I found ways to question Linda about different things she was doing, to ask her about the same subject in 2 or more different ways at different times, and see if I would get the same answer. After playing this game for 6 years of marriage, I never found any clues and never once caught Linda in a lie. In fact, I never expected to succeed. I knew Linda loved me, and we had a good marriage. Remember, I was only doing this as a fantasy, as a game to amuse myself. Strangely, sometimes I was disappointed when I found no sign of her cheating, or seeing her at lunch with a strange guy and then catching her lying about what she'd done that day. I think I was frustrated because I was looking so hard for evidence that I thought I was a failure for not finding it. About 6 months ago, I started noticing some changes. The first thing I noticed was that Linda started wearing only dresses or skirts and blouses to work. No more pants. Then she started wearing more attractive panties, silky white and lacy, sheer black, satin red, etc., and they were all bikini or thong style. Linda also stopped wearing pantyhose and started wearing thigh-length stockings with lace elastic tops to hold them up. I was attracted to Linda dressing this way, but at the same time concerned because I knew she wasn't doing it for me. Linda didn't know that I was watching her dress and undress. She didn't know that I knew what she wore under her dresses and skirts every day. One evening, about a month later, I had to stay late at work and didn't get home until about 11 p.m. When I got home, Linda was already in bed, so I just went to the bathroom to get ready for bed. The last thing I did before heading to bed was to look in the laundry basket for Linda's panties. Usually the panties she wore that day were on top, but they weren't there that night. I had to dig through half the lingerie in the basket to find the black thong panties I had seen her wear in the morning. When I examined the panties, I noticed signs of cheating. It wasn't conclusive, but I now had proof that another man could have had sex with my wife. This realization left me somewhat confused. I was thrilled that finally, after 6.5 years of searching, I had found proof that my wife was cheating on me. But on the other hand, the realization that Linda might actually be cheating on me kept me awake. I stayed up most of the night trying to decide what to do about Linda. I finally decided that I would not tell her what I had learned and would continue to watch her even more closely if possible. Over the next few weeks, I found nothing unusual about Linda's panties or her behavior. In fact, our love life, which had always been fine, suddenly got much better. Linda seemed to enjoy sex with me more and was becoming more aggressive in bed. I began to think that perhaps Linda was having a one-time affair and that her increased interest in having sex with me was due to guilt. This was my reasoning one evening when we had just sat down to dinner and Linda received a phone call. When she returned to the table, she told me that her friend Carol had just called and that they were going to run to the mall after dinner to buy a couple of things. I said, "What kind of things?" And Linda said she needed a new dress for work. That wasn't unusual, but I decided to make sure. After clearing the table, Linda went to change. I followed her, stood outside our bedroom door and watched her as I do every day. What happened next made me very suspicious. First, Linda took a quick shower, and when she got out and dried herself, she pulled a small bag from under the dresser. The bag had the name of an expensive lingerie store at the mall written on it. She pulled the matching bra and panties out of the bag and put them on. While Linda put on her dress, I went back downstairs. She was still getting ready when I called her and told her that I had to run into the office to get some papers and that I would see her later when she got home. Then I said, "Maybe when we get home we could make love." Linda replied, "I don't know, I don't feel very good. I guess I'll just want to come home and go to bed. How about we schedule that for tomorrow night?" I walked out of the house knowing I should be angry, but I actually felt aroused, not so much sexual as the excitement of the hunt. I pulled out of the driveway and headed toward Carol's house. Carol lived only 4 blocks away from us, on the same street. I drove 1 block toward Carol's house, then turned right, drove part of a block, turned around, and drove back before reaching the intersection and parked the car. That way, I could see Linda walking down the street, and she couldn't see me parked around the corner. Then, as she drove by, I could pull out and follow her a safe distance to Carol's house, and then follow them both to see what they were up to. Linda must have been in a hurry because I saw her approaching the intersection where I was waiting just a couple of minutes after I arrived. I started the engine and waited for her to pass, but to my surprise, she didn't. Instead, she turned right and I had to duck under the door so she wouldn't see me. When I looked up again, she was already driving down the street I was parked on, but in the opposite direction. There were 4 or 5 cars behind me, so I couldn't get out and make a U-turn to chase Linda. By the time I could get out, Linda's car was out of sight, and then it hit me. It wasn't Carol who had called Linda at dinner, and Carol wasn't involved in what Linda was up to tonight. It just didn't occur to me that Linda had lied about the phone call. I missed my chance to follow her, assuming she wouldn't lie to me. I drove to the mall, hoping that maybe she'd meet Carol there, but I didn't see either of them and drove home. I felt like a pathetic loser. My wife may well be on her way to an affair, and I had lost sight of her a minute's walk from home. I tried to read, but I couldn't concentrate, and the TV was just annoying, so I just sat there wondering what could be going on. Suddenly, I pictured Linda standing in very attractive bottoms in front of some guy. Then I imagined her having sex with some stranger. At first, these images made me sick, but after a while I realized that they were just thoughts. I sat there and agonized until Linda finally came home around 11:30. When Linda entered the house, she was carrying a shopping bag from one of the mall stores and looked like someone who had just shopped. She came over and kissed me and apologized for being late. I asked why she was so late, and she said, "When we got back to Carol's house, she invited me over for a cup of decaf coffee and a piece of cake." So the lie continues. Linda then opened her shopping bag and asked if I wanted to see her new dress. It seemed she wanted to change the subject. She showed me the dress, then put it back in the bag, left the bag on the chair, went to the kitchen for a glass of water, and headed upstairs. Linda called and asked me to bring her new dress when I got up to bed. Picking up my bag, I climbed the stairs and took up my spy post outside our bedroom door. Linda had just turned on the television in our bedroom and was changing channels with the remote when I came to the door. Once she found the program she wanted, she put the remote down and began to remove her blouse. When I saw her in that lacy bra again, I almost fainted. Linda examined herself and gently ran her hands over her breasts, leaning her head back and closing her eyes. Finally, Linda unbuttoned and buttoned her skirt and let it fall to the floor. It took me almost 5 seconds to realize that Linda was not wearing panties. She was still wearing stockings down to her thighs, but no panties. Panic now gripped me. I opened the shopping bag that Linda had asked me to bring upstairs to see if she had put her panties in there. I dumped the contents of the bag on the floor. I found no panties. I did, however, find another new set of panties and bra from the same exclusive store, as well as the stockings and dress she had shown me earlier. When I pulled up the sales receipt to see how much Linda had spent on these items, I noticed that all the items in the bag had been charged to a MasterCard, and neither Linda nor I had a MasterCard. That was all I could take out. I needed to get answers right away. When I looked into our bedroom, Linda was sitting on the edge of the bed with her back to me. I picked up the things I had thrown on the floor with the check and went into the bedroom to confront Linda. When Linda heard the door open, she quickly climbed under the covers and tried to lie there innocently. I threw the dress and underwear on the bed and asked Linda who had bought it for her. Linda looked stunned. She asked, "What do you mean?" I repeated, "Who bought these things for you? This is a MasterCard receipt and you don't have a MasterCard." I could see she was trying to come up with some explanation about the clothes, so I decided to grab her by the throat. I said, "I would also like to know if the same person bought the beautiful white bra and panties you wore before going out tonight." At this point, Linda looked like she was about to get sick. I continued my attack. "And I'm even more curious to know why, when you got home, you were no longer wearing panties." Linda was silent for a moment. She looked up at me, eyes as big as saucers filled with tears, and finally began to cry, repeating over and over, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I love you. I never meant to hurt you." I waited until she calmed down and very calmly said, "Okay, now I want you to tell me what's going on. I want to know everything. I'm giving you one chance to explain everything, so tell me the truth, no matter how painful it is." Linda started by saying, "First, you have to believe me when I tell you that I love you and only you. It all started 6 months ago when we got a new department head. After he had been here for about 2 months, my manager told me that Mr. Gladstone wanted to see me to talk about my job and career plans. When Mr. Gladstone met me in his office, he introduced himself and asked me to call him Jim. He told me that when he first came here, he asked all the managers to give him resumes of the best and most talented employees. Jim said my manager gave him my resume. Jim said that he read all the resumes and then started watching the employees as they did their jobs. In this way, he was able to compile a list of people he thought were candidates for promotion. On his list were 10 employees in our department. Jim told me I was on that list." Linda reached for her water glass, took a sip, and continued. "Jim went on to say that, unfortunately, there would probably only be openings for 4 people on the list for the next few years, and it was possible that more names would be added over time. He said that right now, looking at the list of people, it is very difficult to determine who he would promote if he had to make a decision right now." Then Jim said, "You know you have special attributes that, if you choose to use them, could make you a leading candidate for any promotion that happens in the next year or so." I asked what those attributes were, and he replied, "You are an attractive woman." He then told me to think about it, and then thanked me for coming and walked me to the door. I said, "That's harassment." Linda raised her hand and asked me to let her finish. When I got home that night, I went to bed early and spent the whole night thinking about what he had said. At first, I thought I should accuse him of love harassment, but then I realized I had no proof. It was my word against his word, and it's entirely possible that I misunderstood him. I decided not to say anything to you because I didn't want to upset you. I thought I could handle it on my own. I decided to ask for another meeting with Jim the next day to straighten things out. The next morning at work, I called Jim's secretary and asked if I could make an appointment. She said she would ask him when he could be free. 10 minutes later, I was on my way to his office. When I entered his office, Jim said, "I was hoping I would see you today." I looked at Jim and asked him what he meant about using my special qualities for promotion. Jim said, "Okay, here's what. On paper, you look just like every other candidate on my list, but you'll look a lot better in your underwear." He must have seen how stunned I was by that comment. He told me to sit down and offered me a cup of coffee. I said it was fine and asked him to continue, thinking I might be gathering evidence for a charge of love harassment. Then Jim continued, "I know you think this is harassment, and you're probably right. But it's also an offer to help you get ahead of the competition, It's a win-win situation. In the end, I simply asked him what I would have to do for him. Jim, taking his time, laid out the case for me. First, if you agree, I will change your position so that you will report directly to me, and your desk will be right outside my office. I will require that you wear only dresses and skirts to work. This is so that you can occasionally show off your body to me during the day. This will be a bit playful, as I want it to look casual and like you don't know it happened. I would also like to randomly peek under your blouse occasionally. Over time, we will build up this behavior until we eventually have sex. As soon as what I want from you changes, I'll let you know by leaving a note or packet on your desk. Jim concluded the meeting by saying, I know it's all a bit overwhelming right now, but if you take time to think about it, I think you'll see the benefits. He then said, before you make a decision, give this person a call and handed me a business card. Before I walked out the door, I turned and said, You know I'm married, don't you? Jim replied, Your husband will never find out, and he will win in the end too. Then, as I was walking out the door, Jim said, Let me know soon, then closed his door. Linda looked at me for comment, and I said, Are you saying this is all for a promotion? Linda replied, Well, that's where it started. Then I called the person he had advised me to call. It was a woman who introduced herself as the director of distribution. I introduced myself and said that Jim Gladstone had advised me to call her. She said I didn't need to say anything else, that she knew what I wanted. She said she worked for Jim 5 years ago. She said she made a deal with him, played his game, and got everything she wanted and had a lot of fun. And without talking to me about it, you decided to go along with it? Linda replied. At first I thought I could get away with just showing him my body, and that the opportunity for promotion would open up long before we entered into a loving relationship. And I thought I could always just say I'd changed my mind and back out of the deal any time I saw fit. I said, I want to know how things developed, what you've accomplished with him now. Linda took a deep breath and started again. I thought showing Jim my body from time to time would be easy, but it turned out to be the hardest part of the whole thing. After the first 2 weeks, Jim called me into his office to tell me that I wasn't doing well. He said I didn't understand how to make it look real. He said I looked like I was just showing him my body. He said that if I don't figure things out soon, our contract will be terminated and I'll go back to my old job. He told me to take it as a game. I was unhappy. He gave me a chance to leave, but I didn't want to leave because I felt like a failure. I decided I was going to do the right thing. I started by studying Jim's every move. Soon I could already tell when he was going to look at me at least 5 seconds in advance. This allowed me to flash at the right moment without even looking in his direction. Once I knew when to flash, I focused on how to flash. I wanted the flash to give him maximum visibility without looking fake or fake. After 2 weeks of doing this, I arrived at work one morning and found a package on my desk. Inside was a note from Jim saying that he was very pleased with the way I had gotten into the game, and now it was time to spice it up a bit. The package contained 5 pairs of panties, bikinis, and thongs. Things went downhill from there. The notes on my desk became more and more detailed. Sometimes I would go into his office and bend over his desk to talk to him, and he would peek over the top of my dress or blouse, and of course, on the days I did that, I was wearing a bar that allowed him to see most of my breasts. As Linda continued her story, I had to sit down because I was suddenly so aroused that my legs were getting stiff. Linda continued. The notes further told me that sometime during the day I should take off my panties and let Jim admire my body. The first time I did this, I thought it would be the hardest thing I had done so far. During my midday break, I slipped into the bathroom, took off my panties, put them in my purse, and returned to my desk. Suddenly, I realized that I was getting aroused at the mere thought of showing my body to another man. The next step was taken when my morning package contained a pair of panties exactly like the ones he had asked me to wear that day, and an envelope with the mailing address of Jim's office. There was no note. It only took me a couple minutes to figure out what Jim wanted. I waited until 10 o'clock in the morning and then went to the girls' room and sat in a stall. Then I did something I had never done at work before. I started caressing my body. I then took off my panties and put them in an envelope and sealed it. I then put on my new panties and went to work. I dropped the envelope in the inside mail and went back to my desk. Later in the afternoon, I saw the envelope being delivered to Jim with the rest of the mail. He placed the envelope from his desk in his lap and opened it. I watched as he bent over his desk. I guessed what he was doing. When he sat up straight again, he looked at me with a wide smile on his face. A few days later, as I was getting ready to go home for the evening, I found a package on my desk. Inside were black thong panties with a piece of paper taped to them that said, "Tomorrow." The next day, I wore those panties to work. In the morning, there was a package on my desk. Inside was an envelope addressed to Jim. Later that morning, I went to the girls' room, took off the panties, and put them in the envelope. After lunch, after receiving the envelope, Jim left his office and took the envelope with him. Jim returned a half-hour later and stopped by my desk with a stack of papers he wanted me to review and respond to, and in that stack was the envelope. I slipped the envelope into my purse and headed for the girls' room. I couldn't believe how much Linda was turning me on with her story. I should have gotten angry, but instead I got turned on. I asked what happened next. After that, Jim started buying me clothes, not just underwear, dresses, skirts, blouses. Our play at work again came down to showing off panties and sometimes my body. Then last month I found an envelope addressed to Jim. As usual, I put my perfumed panties in it. He hadn't sent them back that day, and I was beginning to think he was going to keep them. As I was closing my desk to go home, Jim called me and asked me to come into his office. When I walked in, he asked me to close the door behind me. He then said, "I just wanted to give you your panties back before you went home without them." He indicated that he wanted me to come over to his desk. He made me stand in front of his desk facing him, while he himself remained seated in the chair. He pulled my panties out of the desk drawer and told me to lift my dress so he could see my body. When I did, he leaned forward, inhaled deeply, and told me that I smelled wonderful. He then began to caress my body. After that, he helped me get up from his desk and helped me put on my panties. He didn't say another word as I left. The next day, there were no notes or envelopes all day. As I was about to leave, Jim called me into his office again. I went in and closed the door, and when I turned around, Jim was sitting on the edge of his desk with his back to me. He was facing his chair, putting one foot on the chair. He looked at me over his shoulder and said, "Come over here and sit in my chair." When I got to the table, I complied with his wishes, and it felt good. Linda didn't look at me. She simply replied, "Sometimes you have to change to new situations." I didn't know if I wanted to hear the rest of Linda's story or just have sex with her. The only thing I was sure of was that I wasn't feeling any anger or jealousy. In the end, I decided to let her tell it all the way through. Linda began the story again. Nothing more happened until the evening. In the evening at dinner, I got a call from Jim, not Carol. He said I should meet him at a bar in the center of the Hilton. When I arrived at the bar, Jim handed me a shopping bag and told me that these were the last gifts I would receive from him. He then informed me that he had some good news for me. He said that as of tomorrow, I was becoming the new sales support team manager. He congratulated me, and we drank champagne to celebrate. After we finished the champagne, I asked him if I owed him anything. He said I didn't owe him anything. He said I deserved the job, or he wouldn't have been able to recommend me for the position. He said his only regret was that I was leaving a week earlier than he had planned. He said that in another week, we would have had sex together. I don't know what came over me, but I looked at him and said, "Jim, I think you got your schedule wrong. I think you were supposed to have sex with me tonight." Jim looked at me and said, "Really? Well then, let me see if I can get us a room at this fine hotel." Jim disappeared and returned 10 minutes later with a key, and we headed for the room. When we got to our room, I undressed and stood before Jim in the very expensive lingerie I had bought originally to use for your birthday party. I'm sorry. I decided to take matters into my own hands and told Jim to undress and get on the bed. I then climbed on the bed and we had sex. After that, we rested for a while and then I started to get dressed. Jim just lay on the bed and watched me. As I put on my bra and panties, he told me how beautiful I looked. I went to the bathroom and cleaned myself up a bit, then got dressed and came home. I asked Linda, "When you said you cleaned yourself up a little, did you take a shower or a bath?" Linda looked puzzled and replied, "No." Linda started crying again. "You don't want to see me like this. Please, I didn't mean to hurt you. I only love you. It wasn't about love, it was about a promotion, and I got caught up in Jim's game. Please." I spoke more firmly this time. "Linda, take the covers off so I can see you." Linda closed her eyes and pulled back the blankets, then covered her face with her hands. I looked at that beautiful body, and I didn't feel angry with her, but I sure felt like I wanted to have sex with her. Suddenly, Linda lifted up, grabbed me, kissed me, and said, "I love you." Then I said, "If you love me, then make love to me." And that's exactly what she did. The end! Subscribe to my channel. Thank you.